Republicans just got lit up. And not by the media, not by protesters, but by Adam Schiff himself. In a Senate hearing that should have been about accountability, Schiff exposed the Republican leadership's complete surrender of oversight and their willingness to let chaos replace governance. What happened in that room wasn't just a bad day for decorum. It was a warning about how democracy dies when truth becomes optional. Before we break it all down, do me a favor, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe. We're here to cut through the noise and remind people why accountability still matters. So here's what went down.
Mr. Chairman, one of the advantages of being the junior most member of the committee on our side of the aisle is you get to listen to everything that's gone on before you during the course of a hearing. And I want to add my voice to my colleagues who have raised the concern about what happened yesterday. I listened to my ranking member ask a legitimate oversight question about the legal basis for troops to be rappelling from a Black Hawk helicopter for a military-style assault on an apartment building in a major city, the zip tying of children. What was the legal basis for this? I heard my ranking member ask that very simple question, that completely appropriate question. If that's not an appropriate oversight question, I don't know what an appropriate oversight question is. And the response was not just to refuse to answer the question, but it was to attack the character of the ranking member and to insult him. And then when it was Senator Whitehouse's turn to ask a question, he asked a very legitimate oversight question about a FBI undercover operation in which reportedly $50,000 was paid to the White House border czar prior to him becoming the White House border czar, but with the expectation that he would be helpful in arranging contracts when he became the White House border czar. What happened to the money? A perfectly legitimate oversight question. And rather than answer that question in a closed investigation, not an open investigation, but a closed investigation, she simply attacked Senator Whitehouse personally. And I heard another one of my colleagues ask, what was the legal basis for blowing up ships in the Caribbean? Reportedly, the Justice Department wrote an opinion justifying blowing up ships in the Caribbean. A perfectly legitimate oversight question, and the response was another personal attack. These, what were apparently canned, written personal attacks in advance. I wouldn't bother with the attacks on me. I've grown all too accustomed to them for the last 8 years. But if members of this committee can't ask those serious questions and get serious answers, we can't do oversight. I'm new to this committee. I spent about a decade on the House Judiciary Committee. I never saw a hearing like this with a cabinet officer, and if I did and some Democratic cabinet officer were to personally attack each of my Republican colleagues, I would call for a stop to it. It would be disgraceful. And I understand the reluctance to criticize on your side of the aisle one of the Republican cabinet members. But if this becomes the template for future hearings, we won't be able to do any oversight, and things will just degenerate. These questions deserve answers. I would expect that if troops were rappelling from helicopters in any city, in any of your states, and hog-tying children, you would want to know the legal basis. And so would I. We are going to submit for the record in written form the questions that the Attorney General refused to answer. I would hope, Mr. Chairman, you would join us in submitting those questions. They will have a much better chance of being answered if you join us in submitting those questions. But I would hope also in the future that if a witness, rather than respond, simply attacks our members, that it be stopped. That the witness be instructed to either answer the question or to state why they're refusing to answer the question, but to refrain from personal attacks on the members of this committee. That would be my request. And Mr. Chairman, I'm really grateful to be on this committee. And I appreciate every interaction I've had with you. You have, in our personal interactions, always been eminently fair. If I didn't think that you were of that character, I wouldn't even raise this because there wouldn't be a point. But I would ask that we not have another hearing like that one, and that you join in our legitimate oversight requests. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thought that I set the decorum for a hearing, oversight hearing, when I said before we asked the director of the FBI any questions or any statements, that we should, both sides, treat each other with respect. And I even said to Patel, if you don't get a chance to answer your questions, I'll give you an opportunity after the senator's finished for a few minutes to respond whatever you didn't get a chance to say. And you know how that meeting turned out. And particularly from your side of the aisle, a lot of strong statements about the FBI director. Whether they were legitimate or not is beside the point. It didn't follow the decorum, and obviously the director of the FBI didn't follow the decorum. So I don't know what more I can do than plead with my people who are fellow senators to follow a certain decorum, and I assume it would be followed on the other side. I don't appreciate the insults that went to Democrat members, particularly where they were wrong, but after seeing how senators handled the FBI director, I guess I felt that just let the show go on the way the senators wanted to go on. And that's what developed as a result of it. That may be a weak excuse for what happened that day, but I thought things didn't work out the way I expected them to when the FBI director was here, and some of the people on your side of the aisle were some of the ones that were screaming and yelling and talking over the FBI director. Meeting adjourned.
Adam Schiff, now one of the newest members on the Senate committee, witnessed something that's become far too common in Washington: a Republican nominee dodging responsibility and turning a hearing into political theater. The nominee was Pam Bondi, a Trump loyalist with a long record of protecting power instead of answering to it. Democrats asked serious, necessary questions about the legality of military-style raids in American cities, about reports of children being zip-tied during those raids, about secretive Justice Department opinions justifying the destruction of ships in the Caribbean, and about money tied to an FBI undercover operation. These weren't partisan stunts. They were oversight, the foundation of how Congress is supposed to keep the executive branch in check. But instead of answers, Pam Bondi attacked. Schiff said it best. Her insults weren't spontaneous. They were prepared, written in advance, ready to be unleashed no matter what question came her way. That's not a witness defending herself. That's a political operative treating oversight like an inconvenience. And Schiff wasn't having it. He stood up and made it clear that this isn't how democracy is supposed to work. Oversight isn't a suggestion, it's a constitutional duty. Senators are supposed to be able to ask questions, to demand explanations, to dig into the truth. Because if they can't, who will? He pointed out that if troops were rappelling from helicopters and zip-tying children in any of our cities, every senator, Republican or Democrat, should want to know the legal basis. And he's right. Accountability shouldn't depend on party. But these days, too many Republicans act like defending their side is more important than defending the Constitution. Schiff didn't just speak up for Democrats. He spoke up for the principle that no one, not even a cabinet nominee, is above answering to the people. And that's what made his speech so powerful. It wasn't grandstanding. It was leadership. Then came Chuck Grassley, the Republican chairman of the committee. Instead of condemning Bondi's personal attacks, Grassley shrugged it off. He said decorum broke down because Democrats were tough on the FBI director in a previous hearing. So what did Schiff expect? That was his defense. Let's be honest, what Grassley said wasn't leadership. It was an excuse. He tried to normalize dysfunction, to pretend that because both sides have had tense hearings, this kind of open disrespect for oversight is somehow acceptable. But that's exactly how accountability dies, not with one big scandal, but with 1,000 small shrugs. Schiff saw through that. He warned that if this behavior becomes the new standard, if nominees can just attack senators and refuse to answer, then congressional oversight is finished. And when oversight dies, democracy doesn't collapse overnight. It erodes slowly, quietly, through moments exactly like that hearing. Now let's step back and talk about what this really means. Because this isn't just about one hearing or one nominee. It's part of a bigger pattern. Since the Trump era, the Republican strategy has been crystal clear. Discredit every institution that might hold them accountable. When the courts rule against them, they call the judges corrupt. When the media reports the truth, they scream, fake news. And when Congress dares to question them, they lash out with personal attacks. Pam Bondi's performance was just the Senate version of that same playbook. Attack the questioner, not the question. Make the hearing about personalities, not facts. Turn oversight into a battlefield instead of a process. And when Grassley, the man in charge, shrugs it off, that's how the erosion spreads. Because once disrespect and deception become the norm, the whole system starts to rot from the inside. Schiff's speech was a line in the sand. He wasn't asking for special treatment. He was asking for basic respect for the Senate, for the process, and for the Constitution. He called on Grassley to join him in submitting the unanswered questions for the record and to make it clear that witnesses either answer or explain why they won't, but never resort to personal attacks. That's the bare minimum we should expect from our government. But in today's GOP, even that seems too much to ask. And here's why this moment matters beyond politics. Oversight is one of the few tools we have left to keep power in check. Without it, presidents and their appointees can act with impunity. They can launch raids, spend taxpayer money in secret, and make decisions that affect millions, without having to justify any of it. That's not democracy. That's authoritarianism creeping in through the cracks of our institutions. Schiff's warning was clear. If hearings like this one become normal, then we're normalizing a government that doesn't have to answer to anyone. And that's exactly what authoritarians want. A system where accountability feels impossible, where truth becomes just another political weapon. Now, Grassley's excuse that decorum broke down because Democrats were harsh in another hearing isn't just weak, it's dangerous. It sends a message that the Senate's rules of respect and accountability are optional, depending on which party you belong to. That's not bipartisanship. That's surrender. What Schiff did was remind everyone, on both sides of the aisle, what those hearings are supposed to be about. Truth, oversight, and service to the American people. And when he said he'd never seen a hearing like that before, he wasn't exaggerating. It was a disgrace. But he did what leaders do. He turned that disgrace into a lesson. He made it clear that defending oversight isn't just about winning political points. It's about defending democracy itself. Because when senators stop asking questions, when they stop expecting answers, when they accept insults instead of information, that's when the system breaks. And we're closer to that breaking point than most people realize. That's why we're talking about it here. Because moments like this don't get the coverage they deserve. The big networks will run a few clips and move on. But the truth is, this kind of breakdown, the normalization of impunity, is the real story. It's how democratic institutions die, not in explosions, but in shrugs. So if you're tired of the political theater, if you still believe that Congress should be a place for answers and not attacks, then stay engaged. Like this video, comment below, and subscribe to this channel. That's how we build a community that still believes in facts, accountability, and the idea that public service should mean something. Because at the end of the day, democracy doesn't defend itself. People do. And Adam Schiff just reminded us that sometimes defending democracy starts with refusing to be silent in the face of contempt. That's not partisan. That's patriotic. And that's exactly why his words matter.